Hello folks, welcome to Wednesday. You will notice there is some very nice new footage on the channel, and that is because Dark Tide is now out. Look at this glorious 40k goodness, it's brilliant, isn't it? As we get towards the weekend, I want you to know that I hope that you are having a really good week, and I hope that everything is going swell for you in the world of real life, as we talk about some more 40k lore on the channel. So, let's jump into it, shall we? Because I'm quite excited to talk about this one. As you know, we've gone over we're treading over a bit of old ground on the channel recently, because I've done videos on the Dark Angels before, one before last year. But since I started off this series of 40k lore, I knew I'd be overstepping a few things I've already said before. So I thought it'd be best to get those out the way, do those now, because I love talking about them, and then move on to other things that are a bit more esoteric. So next week, in fact, we will be doing the Space Wolves on the Tuesday, which won't be a ranty video about why I don't like them. It'll actually be a lore video about what works and what doesn't. And then on Thursday, we will actually be doing the Emperor of Mankind himself on Thursday. So stick with me. This is going to get good. Dark Angels, though. Secretly secret boys being secret. That is the meme that we see of the Dark Angels. The Dark Angels, everybody's favourite secret boys. Yet another faction who have been rendered down to a grey sludge so that wargamers with 3 brain cells can make memes about them. That's what's important to Games Workshop after all. Boil it down, take away the nuance, feed the masses, make them buy the plastic. Well, no, I'm afraid. The Dark Angels are not just secret boys doing secret things. They are so much more to me, and a lot of others. So, let's sit back and chill with a cup of tea or a beverage, and talk about them for a little bit. I have separated these videos into the good and the bad, and then I'll tell you how I'd like to change them going forwards. The good first. There is a reason for the secrecy of the Dark Angels, and this is what the Horus Heresy does amazingly well, as a series of books. It takes the mean parts of 40k armies, and gives them a reason to exist. It gives them context. Dark Angels are secretive because they were the first. They were the first legion. So what do I mean by that? Well, they were the first ones to actually be at the Emperor's side. They were the first ones to actually be anywhere near the front line of combat, and the first ones to be entrusted with actually getting out there and starting to conquer in his name in the galaxy, things like that. And with that comes a certain aloofness. You are the oldest. You are the guys who are there first. And being the first, you are naturally, at least at the start, going to be the best at everything. Okay? So the Dark Angels are going to be the best shock troops, rather than the World Eaters, right? They're going to be the best marksmen, rather than the Raven Guard. They're going to be the best, most stoic, tanky guys, rather than the Death Guard, right? They're going to be the best attackers, rather than Lunar Wolves, and all that fun stuff. What the Dark Angels do is their great flaw, which I quite like, is that when the other legions start outstripping them in certain ways of war, like when they become better shock troopers, or better tanks, or better assault people, the Dark Angels don't take it very well. In fact, they become even more reclusive and more prideful, and they start to keep to their own, keep to themselves. Almost as a sense of pride that they don't want to face up to the fact that they're not the best at any one thing anymore. But the true strength of the Dark Angels, and this is what the true irony is of the Dark Angels, and 40k should be steeped in irony, is that if they just accepted that, they would realise that they are the jack of all trades. They are the legion that is an 8 out of 10 in everything, or even a 9 out of 10 in everything. No other legion holds scores that high for every sector of warfare. But the first do. The Dark Angels do. And it's something to be immensely proud of. And I love that as the Legion. I love the fact that subtext is there beneath the surface. The second reason they're quite secretive is they have a Caliban culture of secretive, esoteric knightly orders. What do I mean by that? Well, on Caliban there are knightly orders, and each of them has very secret rites. Don't forget, Caliban is a world steeped in the powers of chaos. It is a loyal world, but it is a world where chaos monsters are. It has certain things living underneath the surface that are giving off very weird energies. And so yes, the Caliban culture of knights do not worship chaos, but they are very influenced by cults. They're influenced by the darker things that are on the world. Even though they are, in fact, loyalist, and they are in fact there to make sure that everybody's okay and everyone's doing well, they still have secrets. They are still I am very, very, very surprised that the warrior lodges that took down the lunar wolves and things like that weren't rife within the Dark Angels. But I also like the reason that we're given for that they didn't. That's because the Dark Angels already have warrior lodges. They don't need your Davonite Chaos warrior lodges. We have loyalist warrior lodges. We don't need your warrior. Their entire legion is built on these sects within sects within sects within sects. I don't say sects there. I said sects. sects. Sect. All these different wheels within wheels within wheels and cogs within the legion that these unspoken rules of authority that you can't cross, that outsiders just won't get. The problem with that we're given about the warrior lodges is that there is no rank there, and everyone can say what they want, and it's like this very open forum. Well, sometimes an open forum, when you're talking about demons and stuff, isn't very good. The warrior lodges that we have in the Dark Angels are still overseen by Legion protocol. So you can't just go in there and start saying, hey, this Emperor guy, isn't that great? He's not that great. Maybe we should go and do something else, right? You can't just do that because you'll be killed, right? So because they're all loyalist. But they are still influenced by the darker parts of Caliban that are already there. And number 3, they are trusted with the most advanced weaponry that even the Mechanicus aren't allowed to even know about. Right? Let alone other legions. Can you imagine that? The Dark Angels are privy to things that make the Necrons blush, or the Necrons would like to get a hold of. I would say the Dark Angels, at the time of the Horus Heresy, if the Necrons came back, I'm telling you now, the Necrons wouldn't be a problem for very long, because the Dark Angels would go from planet to planet and they would annihilate stars. They would just annihilate supernova stars wherever they find Necrons. Supernova, 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 supernova. There would be no Necrons left. That was the height of technology at the height of the Dark Angels Legion. That's what they were given by the Emperor. All these things from the Dark Age of technology that could annihilate stars and annihilate planets within... Not exterminatus. It doesn't take days. I mean, a flick of a button, that planet's gone. Flick of a button, that star's gone. That's the kind of weaponry that the Dark Angels were permitted to oversee. They didn't use it, but they were trusted to be able to use it if the time came, and to judge when that time was nigh, essentially. No other legion is given that amount of trust by the Emperor. Absolutely none. And that's why, those are the 3 main reasons I think that the Dark Angels have a secretive nature, and are quite aloof and apart from everybody else, before we even get into any of the mean territory, right? And that's all phenomenal stuff, and it's all stuff that the Horus Heresy gives to us, despite its terrible books. So, I want to talk about a single book in Horus Heresy that really does set up something about the Dark Angels really well, that I don't hear talked about quite a lot. It's actually a book called The Unremembered Empire. Not a popular novel by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a part in The Unremembered Empire where the Lion actually finds Guilliman on the other side of a great rift. He can't get to Terra, so he goes to the nearest beacon he can see, and it's on Macragge. So he gets down and he talks to Guilliman, and he suspects Guilliman of either siding with Horus or trying to go his own way and make his own Imperium. And make no mistake, the Lion will strike Guilliman down without a second thought within the Unremembered Empire novel, and the Dark Angels would exterminatus Macragge even if the Lion is still on it, if it meant getting rid of a traitor Primarch of the genius tactical level of Guilliman. You heard me right. The Dark Angels would kill their own Primarch. Don't think they wouldn't either. They would. The Dark Angels are stoic, and beyond all else, they do what needs to be done to keep the Imperium going. They aren't fanatically loyal to the Lion in the Heresy. He's their commander and sire. But if he needs to go for the greater good of the Imperium, they'd kill him too. That's what the Dark Angels are. That's why they're so secretive. That's why they don't trust anybody else. They trust the Imperium, they trust the Emperor. But they're so secretive and they're so distrustful of everybody else that they come across as really traitorous. Because Dark Angels would, it is in their makeup, they would kill their own Primarch if it meant getting rid of a Primarch on the level of Guilliman, who had turned traitor. Because Guilliman, yes, he's not that great in combat, but my god, can he lead people? He is more dangerous than Horus, in my opinion. He really is. He definitely is. If Gilliman turned traitor, the galaxy burns without a second thought. The size of the Ultramarines Legion, even if most of them would go with him, even if some of them don't go with him, man, that is going to be terrible. The Dark Angels would kill the Lion if he was standing in the way of the Emperor's vision, without a second thought. Without a second thought. That's why it bleeds so well into the modern 40k literature, where the Dark Angels leave their allies to go and chase the Fallen. They leave their allies where they are to go and chase the Fallen, because that's in their nature. They believe the Fallen are a serious threat to the Imperium, so they leave them. They leave their own allies to go and chase them. That's what the Dark Angels are. Remorseless, relentless, cold, and utterly without equal in terms of battle skill. In short, and remember this part, they resemble the Emperor's true form, what we know of it, better than any other legion or chapter, or any other individual. Sure, other chapters embody a part of the Emperor's will, or the Emperor's anger, or the Emperor's wisdom, or the Emperor's foresight. But to me, only the Dark Angels represent what the Emperor actually is, underneath all that. Underneath the facade that he makes you see, the real man underneath, I think he resembles the Dark Angels quite a lot. I'm going to leave you to think about that for a little minute as I carry on. The Dark Angels Horus Heresy books are terrible. They are. They're awful. They're some of the worst books in the Horus Heresy. But Dark Angels Horus Heresy Context is really good. Right? The wider narrative that you can read into what's going on with the Dark Angels and the little snippets that you're given are really good. The problem is, all of that information could be in one big-ass Dark Angels novel and be the best novel in the Horus Heresy. But because Games Workshop like money, those snippets are spread out among 6 books that you have to pay for, in which nothing really happens. Great. Cheers, G-Dub. Thank you. Moving on to the bad. It's the bad of the Dark Angels. The Lion versus Luthor. It's cheap. It's a cheap repetition of the Siege of Terror. It's nonsensical. The point of the matter is, it's a law of diminishing returns. In the Horus Heresy, we've just seen the Emperor take on Horus in a battle to the death. Why the hell would we be interested in the Lion fighting Luthor, a Space Marine, in the same duel? And you telling us that Luthor is somehow keeping up with the Lion? I don't care if he's imbued with all the power of the 4 Chaos Gods. I don't care. He's still a Space Marine. He's still a Space Marine. The Lion should go in there and just obliterate him. It doesn't have the same stakes as the Siege of Terror. It is a very, very, very bad writing technique that even J.R.R. Tolkien gets wrong, by the way. He has the Scouring of the Shire. After all of the big stuff has gone on, he then does the Scouring of the Shire. I mean, why? Why? I love the fact that Tolkien is there. I love what he does. But I never got that. Even reading Lord of the Rings, I read it once a year. Even reading Lord of the Rings, I still get to that part and I'm like, why did he write this bit? Like, we could have just come back, you know, seen the devastation of the war, even in the Shire, and then gone to the Undying Lands. Everybody's okay. We didn't need to see the Sharku bit with Saruman and all this other stuff. Didn't need to be there. It bloats the novel. And I'm sorry, it just would. It just does. When I'm reading it, it just does. And the Lion and Luthor is the same thing. We've just had the Horus Heresy. Why do we need this now? It's a pale imitation of what we've just seen. It creates fatigue in the reader. We can no longer be bothered. We just want to get on with it. We just want to see what happens to the Lion after this, right? It's nonsensical. It's cheap. It's almost as if the writer of the novels or the lore couldn't think of anything else to do, so he just did the Horus Heresy again. And for some reason, Games Workshop kept that and ran with it. Now, I will fix this later. I'm going to try and fix this later in what I would do differently. I'm going to keep the duel between the Lion and Luthor. I'm going to see if I can fix it, but I'll get to that later. That's one part of the bad of the Dark Angels lore. The second part is the biggest part for me, and it's the part that really does aggravate me when I'm talking about the Dark Angels, where I'm discussing what they do, or all of that sort of stuff. I mean, the 40k Dark Angels are a meme. Everything about them is spun out to the extreme. They even lose most of their knightly trappings in favour of weird hoods and winged helmets. They should look more like robed grey knights in the Dark Angels colours. That's what they should look like, essentially. Their lore resembles a how-to of ruining a secret sect or group within your setting. They should be secretive, but there should be a reason beyond some of us turn traitor, quote unquote. Let's face it, guys. The Ultramarines have traitors every other week joining the forces of Chaos. Now, that's not a slight against the boys in blue. That's not a slight against them at all. There's just so many of the bastards that it's bound to happen at some stage, right? But it still happens a lot. But no one's bringing the gene seed of Gilliman into question, are they? No one's going after the Ultramarines with loads of suspicion, are they? No, because people fall to Chaos. That's what Chaos is. Don't even get me started on the Blood Angels and their propensity for being rather corny, quote unquote. The sheer amount of their chapters that have fallen to the worship of Khorne is beyond me. It's ridiculous, and the Inquisition know about it, but they don't go after the Blood Angels. No one casts aspersions at the Blood Angels' honour. In fact, we even have a whole fucking holiday, 40k Christmas, called Saturnalia. Where we talk, Sanguinalia, sorry, not Saturnalia, that's the Roman one. Sanguinalia, where we talk about Sanguinius, and we celebrate the Blood Angels and the sacrifices that they made for us in the Siege of Terror, right? There's no reason. There is simply no reason to be that secretive about your crusade against the Fallen. There's no reason. Have a crusade, sure, but does it really need to be secret? Can't the Dark Angels just be like, yeah, we hunt the Fallen because they're a stain on our honour? That's fine. That's fine. We don't need secrecy for that. We don't need secrecy for that. That's cool as it is. Right? There should even be something like the White Scars, where what I would do, taking away from my own ideas, but what I would do if I wasn't going to do the secrecy stuff, is I would make it like the White Scars do, where you anoint one champion of the chapter, and he puts on loads of cipher-like robes, paint his armour black and red, etched with red, like a Fallen, and goes out there to hunt other Fallen. He's exiled from the chapter, and he's there to hunt other Fallen. That's what he does. In fact, that very idea is in the Astral Blades. We actually have exiled Blades who actually go out and they actually hunt Fallen. Only one Astral Blade hunts Fallen in any generation, right? That's what I would do with the Dark Angels. I would literally have one supreme champion, the best swordsman and the best tracker and the best everything, the best warrior in the lead in the chapter is handpicked by the Supreme Grand Master and given his robes of office, given his sword. Make him go out there with the lion sword. How cool would that be? So he has to train with this massive sword, and he goes out there with the lion sword, and he has to go out with like loads of other like menials and stuff, because what they do is, if he falls in combat, they take the sword back. So he has like 5 or 6 watchers in the dark who are always around him, and they can just take the sword and teleport back to the rock anytime. So as soon as he falls in combat, they take the sword, they teleport back to the rock. And so they know when one of these champions has fallen, when they have, quote unquote, when the sword comes back to them. How cool would that be? You don't need the entire chapter to go chasing off these stupid secretive crusades that no one ever knows about. It doesn't need to happen. The only way I can see it fitting is because of the First Legion's pride. When I say it fitting, I mean the secrecy. The only way I can see the secrecy fitting is because of the First Legion's pride in being the first. They can't have anybody knowing that some of them fell to chaos. Marines, though, should be above such idiotic things. The Dark Angels here are ironically acting just like Emperor's children. Such is their pride. I like it as a concept, but in reality, there is no need for the secrecy, as it hobbles the lore of the Dark Angels. Much like the Grey Knights, it has a tendency to make their lore too unwieldy to use for fan projects, and even in normal Games Workshop lore, all the Dark Angels ever seem to do is hunt Fallen. They do have other aspects, but they're never explored. And where is all that cool-ass Dark Age of technology tech? Where's it gone? Where's it gone? They should still have some of it left over. They should still be guarding all of this stuff. Do you know where it's gone? Games Workshop boiled the Dark Angels down to their base meme and just ran with that. Because they think that's all you can understand because you don't have a fucking brain. You do have a brain, but they think you don't. Right? Put it this way. Space wolves are werewolves in space. Duh. Dark Angels are secretive dickheads. Duh. Blood Angels are literally vampires. Duh. Really? Really? That's what we're boiling... That's what they are now, right? They're memes. Cheers, G-Dub, thank you. I don't want to see any more Mephiston art of him with fangs, looking like that guy from fucking Castlevania. I don't want to see that anymore. I don't want to see it anymore. They should be as they were before the Horus Heresy. Maybe a little bit changed, but just as they should be that. They should just be that. But now they have the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, fine, but they should just be that. They should be noble warriors with a darker side. If I was a normal person and I saw a Blood Angel these days, I'd be like, that's a vampire. I wouldn't say that's a Blood Angel, but I'll get to them when I get to them. Annoying. So, the interesting bit. How would I change them? Let me take a swig of my tea before I get into this part. Alright, lovely. How would I change them? I have spoken before on the channel about how I would solve one specific problem when it comes to the Dark Angels. Namely, the lame-ass fight between the Lion and Luther. For the OG Chads among you, feel free to switch your brains off whilst I go over this again. I would solve this problem by having Alpha and Omegon of the Alpha Legion not be the only twin Primarchs in the setting. The Lion and Luther, in my headcanon, that I would use to fix this, are twins. Literally the same guy, different bodies. Both land on Caliban and are separated at a young age with barely any memories of one another. Barely any memories of one another, right? So they land on Caliban, they're split apart in the forests, and they're taken away from each other. Luther is taken by the Order and becomes a knight, their leader in fact. And the Lion becomes a wandering barbarian in the forest, killing massive chaos monsters. In fact, the monsters keep being driven towards the defences of the Order, and Luther has no idea what's driving them. Well, it's the Lion beating them so badly that they are actually fleeing the forests towards civilized lands. When Luther finally leads his war party into the wilderness to find the source of the monsters, he and the Lion find each other. It's like that scene that the Olsen twins are always in when they find each other. You know, that kind of a thing. It's like meeting yourself, but if you hold up a mirror to what you could have been. Luther sees an evil barbarian without reason. The Lion sees a shining warrior clad in knightly armour leading men who revere him. Chaos monsters attack the twins and they drive them off before the Lion heads back to the Order with Luther. There he is educated and eventually accepted as Luther's brother and second in command. Soon though, the Lion starts to outstrip Luther in terms of tactical acumen and sheer physical skill with a blade. He leads the crusades that drive back the monsters for good, and with the help of Luther, and is, in the end, proclaimed the ruler of all Caliban. Luther feels the first pang of jealousy. Now there is a reason why Luther isn't as good as his brother in combat or in tactics. It's because he's a latent psyker. He has these dreams about these gods and these demons and things like that. He can't sleep a lot of nights because he has these dreams. He's touched by the warp, but he doesn't know what that is yet, and he can't really put his finger on it. But he has a lot of pumped up psychic energy within him that he hasn't been able to touch. He hasn't been able to let it loose yet, right? And that is the reason why he's not as good as his brother in terms of these things, because he's struggling with all these other things as well, on top of being a Primarch. This jealousy only grows when the Emperor visits Caliban and sees the twins. He sees that the Lion is everything that he wanted. He's the Lion we know from the current setting. Luther, however, is just like the Lion, but he is a psyker of such prodigious talent that he could literally obliterate Magnus for sheer potency. He is that talented. And that scary. Problem is, he hasn't come into his powers yet. He hasn't really figured out what they are, or that he can even use them. Which the Emperor's fine with, because he doesn't need two psykers in the Primarchs right now. Not ones on Magnus level anyway. So he's like, okay, fine. He decides he cannot take both, and needs a warrior, so takes the Lion to lead the Dark Angels, whilst Luther stays to rule Caliban. One day, the Emperor may need a psyker of his raw talent to aid him, maybe even with the Golden Throne. For now, he leaves the latent power of Luther alone, and takes the Lion to the Great Crusade. The story from here follows the same paths that it does in our current setting. Caliban becomes a place of exiles away from the Legion, and Luther begins to hear the tempting voices of the Chaos Gods through the warp as his powers begin to awaken. The Horus Heresy happens, and Luther does not know what to do. He hates the Imperium for taking his brother away from him and leaving him on Caliban, and he feels nothing for the Emperor, his supposed father. He only feels for his warriors and his world. And for those of you who say that the Emperor wouldn't do something as stupid as leaving a psyker like Luther alone on a planet like that, yeah, meet Angron. Meet Perturabo. Yes? Yes, he would. Yes, he would do something like that to a Primarch if it furthered his agenda, whatever that is. The Dark Angels that come back to the world are cold and aloof, keeping secrets from his warriors about where they have been and what they have seen and what weapons they wield in the name of the Emperor, okay? The Dark Angels are secretive about their Dark Age technology stuff, right? They don't want to tell Luther about it. Maybe the Lion has told them not to tell Luther about it. The resentment proves too much for Luther. Luther silently, secretly, secedes from the Imperium, and in this state his paranoia and hatred only grows. The Horus Heresy ends, and the Lion comes back to Caliban, demanding answers from his brother about why his forces did not aid Terra to help the Emperor. Instead, the final confrontation happens between the Fallen and the Dark Angels. Luther, powered by the Chaos Gods, beats the Lion into near death before losing his nerve before the killing blow. The Gods of Chaos realise in that moment they have failed to gain his soul as he drops his sword and pleads with the Lion to not die. They send a warp storm to annihilate Caliban. This leads us to modern 40k, with Luther locked within the rock and the Lion sleeping, his wounds healing, deep within the fortress monastery. So this is kind of a repeat of the Horus Heresy, as we've seen, but there's now a reason for it to be a repeat of the Horus Heresy. There's now a reason why the Lion can't just bitch slap Luther. Luther is powered by all four Chaos Gods at this point, and he's unleashed his full power on the Lion, who's not expecting it. And he nearly kills him. I then do what the Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus thing is, because they were kind of like brothers. They weren't literally like, they were kind of like brothers, in terms of, like, you know, technically they're brothers, because they're two Primarchs, you know. But the Lion and Luther are literally twins. They're literally the same person. You can't kill yourself. You know what I mean? Like he's holding the sword above his head, and he can't bring it down. And I would say that it's not just mercy that makes him do it. It's the fact that he's seeing himself. His noble self. You're seeing that reflection again, and he can't kill it within himself. So he drops the sword. Unlike Fulgrim, who just does it because he likes Ferrus Manus. You know, it's deeper stuff, deeper things we're exploring here. This is such a keener betrayal than simply some Marines falling to chaos. It is a Primarch falling to chaos. If you really want super secretive Dark Angels who need to be secretive, this is the way to do it. A few Marines being fallen is fine. I mean, the Inquisition will likely shrug and look at the Dark Angels suspiciously, but what are they going to do? It was 10,000 years ago, right? Instead, the Dark Angels in this setting are guarding the secret that one of their fathers fell to chaos, which points to a much greater flaw in their makeup and their character. This is why they hunt the Fallen with such an obsession. It also brings Luther to the power level of the Lion without any ridiculous mental gymnastics, and slots right into the current 40k setting. You could see this change in the next Codex in 10th edition as a big reveal that would blur everybody's minds, but it would not be a change that slaps out of nowhere, like the Primaris Marines did. I actually say this is a much more elegant way of solving the problem of the Dark Angel secrecy and how much of a fucking meme they are. Aside from this, I would have the Dark Angels keep their robes of secrecy, change them to look a bit more like Grey Knights and more knightly. It's fine if given the current context, if given the correct context and called back throughout the army books. It's called back throughout the army books that they are secret and that they are kind of becoming a meme in later generations. I don't mind that so much, as long as there is a clear and defined explanation on why they are such a meme. The problem is that the secrecy is currently treated as a meme and not a particularly good one. It's not handled with any grace or talent. I love it when companies have fun, but when Games Workshop buys into the memes by accusing Dark Angels of being chaos in a tongue-in-cheek way, they just feed the machine that has boiled down mind sludge nonsense. Do you remember that thing that the Warhammer team on Facebook once did, where somebody said, "Hey, when's the next Chaos Codex out?" And they said it's already out, and they showed a picture of the Dark Angels Codex, right? Again, very funny, brilliant. But what you're doing there is you're buying into the meme. You're buying into the stupid ass, smooth brain nonsense that a lot of your fan base cultivates. They strip away all of the nuance, all of the cool stuff about your setting, and they boil it down to its base concept. And when you do that, you get worse books, worse lore, and you know what? You get worse models. The Dark Angels could look a lot cooler than they actually do these days. They could, and they should. Instead, what do? Winged helmets and robes. Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks. Winged helmets and hoods. Thanks. Cheers. Yeah. Exactly what I wanted. Come on. Come on. Come on now. Dark Angels can be a lot better than that. You've done Stormcast Eternals. Put some robes on those guys and give them Grey Knight-like helmets. Bang! Fucking Dark Angels. Done. Solved it for you. There you go. 40k is one of the most glorious and complex settings we have. Let it be that. Engage with it on your level, sure. But the voice of the hobby in Games Workshop should not be cutting down the brain cell count of its own lore to satisfy meme lolcows. What do you guys think? This will be a similar argument that's going to be made for the Space Wolves and Blood Angels going forwards, because I think that those legions and chapters are slapped heavy with the meme brush, and they deserve a lot better, even the Space Wolves, and I'll get into that next week. But what do you guys think of the Dark Angels? Do you think that, they're people who should be respected more, or do you like them the way that they are? If you like them the way that they are, let me know in the comment section down below. What would you change about them in the comment section down below? I love you all long time. I will speak to you tomorrow with some more hobby nightmares. Love you all. See you later. Have a good one.